20 years. That is how long Peppa Pig has been on television. 20 years of muddy puddles and family trips and playgroup adventures, and George in the background saying one word and one word only.
Dinosaur.
That was it. That was his entire vocabulary for 2 decades. Millions of children grew up watching this little pig and just accepted it. George is quiet. George loves dinosaurs. George cries sometimes. That is just who George is. Except it was not the whole story, and now we know that. A month ago, we covered the announcement. The clips, the teasers, the trailers that told us George had been diagnosed with moderate hearing loss. But we were working with fragments, scraps of information that pointed towards something bigger without fully showing us what it was. Now the actual episodes are here, and they do not just show George getting a hearing aid and moving on. They show us what comes after. The sounds he can finally hear clearly, the moment he discovers what his own voice is capable of. And then, in a brand new episode called Favorite Sound, after 20 years of silence, George Pig looks at his sister and says her name out loud for the very first time.
Yeah, Peppa.
Today, we are breaking down everything that actually happens across these episodes. George's journey from before the hearing aid to after it. The class presentation, the butterfly, and the moment that made a children's cartoon about cartoon pigs feel like the most emotionally significant thing we have watched in a long time. Before the big moments, we need to start where the show started, with an episode called George's Day in the Life. It does something genuinely clever. It tells the story entirely from George's audio perspective. We do not just watch George move through his day, we hear what he hears.
I said, buckle up, buttercups.
The ice cream van drives past, and the melody that every child in the neighborhood recognizes immediately comes through muffled and faint for George. Not broken, not completely absent, just different enough that it does not land the way it should. Peppa calls him from across the room, and her voice sounds distant, like something is always getting lost in the space between them. Everyday sounds that most people process without thinking just do not arrive the same way for George. What the episode shows so quietly is that George has built workarounds. He watches faces instead of waiting for sounds to reach him. He waits for Peppa to tap his shoulder rather than calling his name, because tapping is reliable in a way that calling across a room is not. He has constructed an entire system for navigating a world that was not quite reaching him the way it was supposed to.
He's a smart piggy.
Playgroup time, George. Huh? It's playgroup time.
Without anyone around him fully realizing that is what he was doing. Peppa had been helping him this whole time without knowing it, tapping his shoulder to get his attention, making sure she was facing him when she spoke, standing close instead of calling from a distance. She was not doing these things because someone told her to. She had simply learned, over years, that this was how you communicated with George. We spent 20 years watching this and thinking he was just a quiet toddler with a dinosaur obsession. Turns out he was navigating something much bigger than that the entire time. And his big sister had quietly been his bridge to the world without either of them ever having the words for it. Then the new episodes dropped. The first one is the main Peppa Pig episode called Hearing Test. The setup is simple. The whole family goes in for routine hearing checks. Nothing dramatic on the surface, just one of those ordinary family appointments that fills an afternoon. George's results come back. Moderate hearing loss in his left ear. Right there in the episode, sitting in that doctor's office, the Pig family finds out what George has been experiencing. He gets fitted with a hearing aid, bright blue, small and neat, sitting just behind his ear like it belongs there, because it does. The follow-up episode is where things get really interesting. A Peppa Pigtails episode called Hearing Aid. George shows up at playgroup wearing his hearing aid for the first time. Susie Sheep immediately starts talking loud and slow.
Oh, can you hear better now?
Exaggerated, like George has suddenly forgotten how language works just because he is wearing something new behind his ear. Peppa steps in immediately.
So you don't have to talk loud and slow, Susie. Oh.
Calm, matter of fact, not unkind. Peppa is not just protecting her brother in that moment, she is teaching an entire classroom of children and every child watching at home how to actually interact with someone who wears a hearing aid. You talk to them normally. You treat them like a person. It is such a small moment, and it lands so cleanly. Madame Gazelle asks George if he would like to explain to the class how he got his hearing aid. George freezes. All those eyes on him, and the words are not coming. Peppa leans over. You draw the pictures, and I tell the story. George picks up the pencil and starts drawing. The hospital. He forgets the door at first, then adds it back in while giggling at himself. The hearing test. Except in George's version, the hearing test is not boring medical equipment in a white room. It is robots beeping and dinosaurs roaring. He is telling his own story, but telling it like George. With all the imagination that has always been inside him, but never had a stage quite like this one. Every time Peppa narrates and gets a detail slightly wrong, George corrects her. Firmly, cheerfully, just one. He is fact-checking his own sister in front of his entire class. Not just participating in the story, owning it. Making sure it is told correctly because it is his story and the details matter to him. The final drawing is his hearing aid. The class cheers. The narrator closes the episode with a line so precise it stops you cold.
George's hearing aid will always help him when he needs it, just like his big sister, Peppa.
Two things helping George navigate the world: his hearing aid and Peppa. The device and the person. The technology and the love. The show put them in the same sentence because they belong there. Because for George, they have always functioned the same way. Quietly. Constantly. Without asking for anything in return. We have been watching this kid for 20 years and thinking he was just background. Turns out he was carrying something the whole time. What happens next is the moment that makes everything worth waiting for. The episode that contains the moment everyone has been waiting for is called Favorite Sound, released on the 9th of March. And if part 1 was about George finding his voice in front of his class, this episode is about what he does with that voice when it is just him and his sister. Peppa has been showing George the world. Not explaining it, not lecturing him, just sharing it the way an excited big sister shares things with someone she loves. With his hearing aid in, George is experiencing sounds he has technically heard before, but never with this kind of clarity. The ice cream van melody that was muffled and faint in that Day in the Life episode is coming through properly now. Birds chirping, small sounds, ordinary sounds that most people walk past every day without registering. For George, right now, every single one of them feels new. Peppa wants to show him her favorite sound, the most Peppa Pig sound that has ever existed in 20 years of this show. Muddy puddles, the splash, the jump. The thing that has defined this series since the very first episode. She is out there jumping, being completely and entirely herself, sharing something she loves with someone she loves. That is the whole intention. Then George wanders off. He spots a butterfly and follows it. Quietly, curiously, the way George has always moved through the world, drawn towards small, beautiful things that catch his attention. Peppa is left standing by the puddles. She is upset. Not dramatically, not in a way that becomes a big scene, just genuinely, quietly hurt. She was trying to share something important and he walked away without even meaning to. That feeling is so specific and so real that it lands even inside a cartoon. The butterfly is worth slowing down on. George follows butterflies across multiple episodes in this story arc. Even back in the Day in the Life episode, before the diagnosis, before the hearing aid, before any of this, he is already doing it. And once you notice it, it is impossible to unsee. A butterfly is the single most recognizable symbol of transformation in the natural world. The whole point of a butterfly is that it used to be something else. It went through something quiet and contained and invisible to everyone watching from the outside. Then it came out the other side completely changed. George is living that same arc. From a kid who navigated the world in near silence, who built workarounds and watched faces and waited for shoulder taps, to a kid who stands in front of his class and corrects his sister and draws his own story with confidence and joy. The writers place that butterfly in these episodes deliberately. It is not background detail. It is the whole metaphor made visible, sitting quietly in the corner, doing its work without ever announcing itself. Peppa goes to Mummy Pig. She is standing there, clearly a little sad, not quite ready to talk about it, but not quite able to hold it in either. The way children carry small hurts before they have the words to explain them. And while she is standing there, George comes over. He walks up to her. He looks at her face, and he says it.
Peppa.
One word, her name, clear as day. No dinosaur. No crying. No pointing or gesturing or waiting for someone else to bridge the gap. Just George, looking at his sister, saying her name out loud for the first time in 20 years of television. Peppa's reaction says everything. The surprise and the joy and the disbelief all arriving at exactly the same moment.
You said my name!
She has to say it out loud to confirm it happened. Like hearing it once was not quite enough to make it feel real. Think about what that single word actually contains. 20 years of George in the background, 20 years of Peppa being his bridge to the world, tapping his shoulder, facing him when she talked, helping without ever being asked and without ever making it about herself. Now George has a hearing aid that lets sound reach him the way it was always supposed to. And the first real word he chooses, the first thing he says with his new voice in the way that matters most, is her name. Not a request, not a need. Just her name. Because after everything, she is his favorite sound. It is easy to feel the weight of that moment and leave it there. But the story underneath the story deserves to be said out loud. Because George's journey is not just meaningful to the millions of children who watch Peppa Pig. It is meaningful to a very specific group of those children in a way that goes deeper than entertainment. Globally, 34 million children are deaf or hard of hearing. For many of them, preschool television is one of the first places they look to understand who gets to be the main character, who gets to have a story, who gets to grow and change and be seen. In the United Kingdom alone, there are over 54,000 deaf children. Nearly a quarter of them are deaf in one ear, just like George. One ear, moderate loss, exactly matching the little pig they have been watching on screen. A study found that 98% of parents of children with hearing loss believe that seeing deaf characters in children's television has a positive impact. More than half say it helps their children develop a stronger sense of self. Nearly half say it helps them feel less isolated. Those numbers sit differently after watching George stand up in front of his class and draw robots and dinosaurs to explain his own diagnosis. After watching him correct Peppa mid-sentence because the details of his story matter to him. After watching him follow a butterfly across a garden and then turn to his sister and say the one word she did not know she had been waiting to hear. This is not a show that added a deaf character for the sake of a headline. This is a show that took 20 years of established character history and found something true inside it. George was never just quiet. He was always navigating something, and now the audience finally gets to see him navigate it on his own terms. The show is not treating this as a storyline that quietly disappears next season. Peppa Pig has launched a dedicated sign language YouTube channel with full episodes featuring both British Sign Language and American Sign Language interpreters so that deaf children and their families can engage with the show in a way that reflects their own experience. Hasbro has released toys featuring George wearing his hearing aid. Physical toys that a child with hearing loss can hold in their hands and see themselves in. The Peppa Pig theme parks have updated their George character to wear a hearing aid during meet and greets, so that a child who visits and wears one themselves can walk up to George and feel, even just for that moment, completely normal. This is a decision. A permanent, fully committed decision about who George Pig is from here forward. He is not going back to the background. He is not going back to one word and nothing else. He has his hearing aid, he has Peppa, and now he has his voice.
Oh yeah! Peppa! Peppa!
So that is the full story. George's world before the hearing aid told through his own ears. The diagnosis on an ordinary afternoon. The class presentation drawn in robots and dinosaurs. The narrator line that put Peppa and the hearing aid in the same sentence because they belong there. The butterfly that was never just a butterfly. And then the moment in the garden, quiet and unhurried, where George walks up to his sister and gives her the one thing neither of them had words for until now. 20 years, one word, her name. Which moment hit you the hardest? Let us know in the comments. If you missed our first video on George's hearing loss, it is linked right here. Subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this one. We will see you in the next one.